We do have a presentation we want to make before lunch, so we'll try to do that and also get you out and get you, we've got about an hour and 20 minutes. I hope that's enough time. I know the first break was probably too short since you just all saw each other and looked at each other's information in the packet, so we'll try to get you that time at lunch because part of this is about networking. We have a great panel for you this morning in terms about more about how to do the things we just talked about from a theoretical level in terms of open innovation challenges. We're going to do two things right in a row, though, because the time is relatively short. So I'm going to introduce Robynn and Bev at the same time. And Robynn's going to give her remarks while Bev gets ready for her panel. So our next speaker is Robynn Sturm, who is the advisor for open innovation to the Deputy Director of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. And she works to increase the administration's use of prizes and challenges to stimulate innovation, advance open government, and bring the top talent and best ideas to bear on our most pressing problems. She holds a bachelor's and master's degree in political science from Yale and also received her law degree from Yale. Let me also introduce Bev. Bev Godwin, to my left, is the director for Federal Citizen Information Center, which is a new role, I believe, fairly recently. And prior to that, she was the director, Center for New Media and Citizen Engagement in the U.S. General Services Administration. She has a master's of public policy from the Ford School of Public Policy from the University of Michigan and a bachelor's from Bernard College in political science. And I got to know Bev through open innovation work, and I've been on 2 panels with her, and she's a tough interviewer, so she'll run a great panel here with the lightning round, and then we want to open up the questions to the audience. So please listen and be prepared to ask questions. You got a lot of very interesting people up here who've done a lot of work in this field. So next, I'll turn it over to Robynn.
Great. I'm good. Thank you and good morning. So as Jeff mentioned, my name is Robynn Sturm, and I'm the administration's lead on prizes and challenges. Like Jeff, I share his goal that hopefully will come out of today with some concrete things that we might collaborate on, whether it be collaborations across agencies or public-private partnerships using some of these tools together. I think that the speakers this morning did a fantastic job of laying out the framework for how open innovation works and making a case that open innovation should be part of every single entity's innovation strategy and a tool in every entity's toolbox, whether they're in the public sector or in the private sector. So what I wanted to do with the 10 minutes that I have right now is to provide a little bit of context for you, a snapshot of what is happening with prizes in the federal government, also a sense of what the Obama administration is doing to make prizes a tool in every agency's toolbox, and then finally to turn to what the implications of our work are for those of you who are in the room, regardless of whether you're in the federal government or whether you're in the private sector or in a nonprofit, and how we might work together. So first, a quick snapshot of what's happening. Jeff mentioned this morning the incredible work that the Space Life Sciences Directorate has been doing here at NASA with pilots over the past year, so I'll move very quickly through those. But I think the point I want to make with the next few slides is simply that they're absolutely not the only ones who are doing this work. So while the public sector definitely lags behind the private sector in uptake of open innovation strategies, there's a lot that's been going on, and the experience and the results are growing very quickly within the public sector. So some of you might be familiar with DARPA's Urban Challenge. This was a competition for unmanned vehicles in an urban environment. So basically cars that have no driver and that are not run by a remote control, completely through artificial intelligence, being able to navigate a complicated obstacle course. The winners of the 2005 and 2007 challenges that were run by DARPA then went on to work for Google, who has since created a Toyota that is actually completely unmanned for their street view work that they do. And recently they announced that their cars, while never being without someone, a human in the passenger seat who can take control if something goes wrong, have actually covered 140,000 miles of roads in California, from the incredibly crowded streets of Los Angeles to the curvy roads along the coast and everything in between. So that just being kind of one example of the ways that prizes in the public sector have really led to leapfrog technological innovations. But prizes aren't important to the public sector just for in the technological or the scientific sector. It's also something where there's a lot of experimentation and social innovation. So a great example here is the G20 SME Finance Challenge. This was led by the Department of Treasury, working obviously with other partners within the G20, as well as the Rockefeller Foundation and Ashoka Changemakers. And the goal here was to identify the best models for financing small and medium-sized enterprises, primarily in emerging economies and in the developing world. The 14 winners that were identified through this challenge are actually going to be the beneficiaries of $500 million from G20 countries to be able to scale those models and be able to reach more businesses. Others, just flipping through very quickly, these types of approaches have been used for everything from some of our priorities in space, astronaut gloves and lunar landers, by NASA's very successful Centennial challenges that have been incredibly successful in terms of tapping expertise from student teams, from citizen inventors, and also from entrepreneurial firms that are outside the traditional aerospace industry. Also in the field of childhood obesity, this is a challenge that the First Lady announced last March. Also with regards to clean energy technologies, especially in the advanced vehicle technologies, which I'm going to come back to this a little bit later, type 1 diabetes, and many more. So there's a lot of experimentation that's happening across the government. In fact, in just the past 3 months, on Challenge.gov, there's been nearly 60 challenges by more than 25 different agencies. So there's a lot that's happening. And what I'm working on and what the administration is trying to do is to actually make prizes something that every agency has a standard tool in their toolbox, so that along with contracts and grants and cooperative agreements, that while prizes aren't the right tool for everything, that they are something that every agency knows how to use and uses when it's most appropriate. So what are we doing on that front? One is with regards to policy. The administration has made it really clear that this is the goal, that every single agency should increase their use of prizes and challenges, and both through the President's Strategy on American Innovation that was released in September of 2009, as well as clear guidance from the Office of Management and Budget that was sent to the head of every department in March of this year. Second, lowering some of the barriers with regards to technology. So the administration, led by the General Services Administration and their partner Challenge Post, launched Challenge.gov in September of this year. The goal for Challenge.gov is twofold. One is that it has a really clean and simple wizard that's 100% federally compliant, that once agencies have done the hard work of designing a challenge, they're able to actually host it on Challenge.gov for free without any further processes. But second, knowing that Challenge.gov is not the right platform for every challenge, it also aggregates all federal challenges, regardless of where they're hosted, so that entrepreneurs and innovators can have a one-stop shop where to know where they can go to be able to help solve federal challenges. Third, probably much larger of a challenge than the technology is the capacity, the knowledge about how you actually use these tools. And so we've helped to lead a number of trainings as well as a community of practice to build a space for federal practitioners to be able to share lessons learned and to understand how to identify those problems that can best be solved by prizes, how to design them and how to conduct them successfully. And then the last piece is legal. And I'm going to spend actually a little bit more time on this one because I think it's the one with the most implications for us today. So on December 21st, at the very end of last year's congressional session, Congress passed the America Competes Act. And in the America Competes Act, there was Section 105 dealt with prize authority. And it essentially granted very broad prize authority to all federal agencies across the executive branch. This is important because to date, one of the main barriers to agencies being able to pursue prizes as a core tool in their toolbox has been ambiguity about their authority to do so. So I want to spend a little bit of time just walking through some of the key provisions that you all should know about for the purposes of potential future collaborations. And I'd encourage you, all of you, to take a look at the actual text in the bill itself. So one is, you can see the first section, 24B, essentially, and I apologize for the legalese, but the language is actually worth taking a look at, which is it empowers the head of any agency or the heads of multiple agencies to carry out a program to award prizes competitively to stimulate innovation that has the potential to advance the mission of their respective agency. So there's a couple important points here. One is that each head of an agency, here agencies in this act are actually defined as all federal agencies, as defined by the Stevenson-Weidler Technology Innovation Act, which this amends. So it's incredibly broad in that respect. Also note that it says, or the heads of multiple agencies. We're going to come back to this too again. It's mentioned in a couple different parts in the bill. So just noting that Congress specifically is looking at collaboration across agencies. And the language around has the potential to advance the mission of the respective agency. So when thinking about the goal of when and where agencies should use prizes, an acknowledgement that it's at the discretion of agencies to identify those that will be the most powerful in advancing their core mission. So the second, I'm not going to read this whole piece, but in terms of funding, the pieces I want to point out here are that it specifically authorized agencies to use federal appropriated funds. It authorizes agencies to use it not only for prize purse, but also for design and administration of a prize, so all parts of the life cycle of a prize. And finally, that it specifically also envisions that funding for prizes can come from the private sector, so building directly into the legislation this vision for multi-sector partnerships, and also that funds can come from other federal agencies to support such competitions. So again, seeing in several clauses throughout this goal and the enabling language to be able to see collaborations between agencies as well as in public-private partnerships. This last one, just to give you a sense of scale, Congress wrote that no prize competition under this section may offer a prize in amount greater than $50 million without further consultation with Congress, right? So there's a lot of space there for agencies to work with. And then the last two I'm going to bring up are two areas where Congress specifically both mandated and encouraged and enabled agencies to work with the private sector, with non-government actors, when both, one, selecting what topics should we be doing challenges on. So they want, as well as in evaluating what the submissions that come in as the solutions to those challenges. So what is so all of these pieces are really important because it is going to unleash an incredible amount of activity in the public sector in 2011. And when I say, and that is across all of the different federal agencies that cover a very broad set of issues, so including NASA, the work that Dr. Davis and his team are doing here in the Space Life Sciences Directorate, but also in the Health and Human Services, the Department of Education, USDA, the Department of Defense, all of the various vertical areas. And as they engage in and begin using prizes and challenges as a tool in their toolbox to solve tough problems, we encourage them strongly to not do it alone. Because it's very important for them to be able to partner with others and to be able to bring in that expertise and also to identify areas where they're trying to solve a problem that also others are trying to solve and being able to leverage various resources. So just to give you a couple examples of what it might look like for an agency to partner, I want to mention two that have actually happened already successfully that are great models. So one is the Automotive X Prize, which I mentioned earlier. This was a prize for it was a $10 million prize for a 100 mile per gallon, or the energy equivalent vehicle that was production ready. This is really interesting because for the Automotive X Prize, the prize purse was actually put forward by a company, Progressive Automotive Insurance. The prize itself was implemented by a foundation that had a ton of experience in terms of actually conducting the prize and being able to do the outreach required. And the Department of Energy invested about $9 million and played a really critical role in terms of evaluation. So they offered Argonne National Laboratories, which had all of the equipment necessary to be able to test the submissions in a very neutral, very fair, very rigorous, and identical way. And that was critical to the competition, but it was also really valuable to the Department of Energy, which then was able to get a snapshot of all of the technologies that those 111 teams from around the world submitted as part of the competition and understand how did they measure up against each other with regards to the goal of greater fuel efficiency. So that's a really interesting model. Something very similar happened recently with a prize that was announced just last week, where USAID had partnered with the Gates Foundation for a prize to build a mobile money network in Haiti. So you might have seen there was an award for $2.5 million that in a very short period of time, a private sector company was able to step up and build 100 new outlets for a mobile money product that met the requirements of the prize, and to be able to expand that to the number of customers that was required to win the prize. In that instance, working with the Gates Foundation was incredibly important. Both partners, the Gates Foundation and USAID, brought very different things to the table. And so I think both of these are just two small examples of the number of ways that we'll see agencies working with private sector companies, with foundations, with nonprofits, in the months to come. And so please do feel free to come up to me in the rest of today. I'd love to hear more about what you're thinking about, what your goals and priorities are. I know that Jeff and his team are incredibly eager to partner with you on shared goals, but there's others, even some who aren't here today, that I think would really benefit from being able to collaborate on future projects. That's it.